Hello, what's up everyone? This is Kia Keeley. Welcome back to another AutoStratic training. Today we're going to be covering swing trading. I'm going to cover some of the concepts involved in swing trading, as well as how we can use AutoStratic to further our ability in swing trading, how to maximize your trade setups. We're going to be covering some of the new features that were just added to AutoStratic today. I'm going to show you exactly how to install them. And then we're going to be reviewing some trades, taking some questions, and just looking at charts, see what we can find and how we can connect it to the topic at hand. So the first thing I want to show everybody is how to update AutoStratic, okay? So the very first thing I want to show here, we just released a new update today, okay? So in order to update AutoStratic, number one, take AutoStratic off the chart. Take one of the indicators off the chart. That's number one. Okay. Number two, we go to wap.com. We click on your orders up here in the top right. We tick teach.trade. And then we click claim TradingView access. Okay. After we click claim TradingView access, that will refresh our indicators on TradingView. As you update, how do you know that something is the most recent version? If you double click on the indicator, version 1.3 is the most recent version, okay? So this is what we're working with. So what's new in version 1.3? Well, there's various quality of life changes. We fixed a bit of a disappearing options contract little thing that was happening for a couple of days for a few people, but that's been all the way fixed. But the main big new feature we have is the trading journal. So now, implemented into AutoStratic, you have a trading journal where you can jot down reminders, notes, watch lists, trading plans, affirmations, or goals. Okay? And so this is super helpful, especially when you're using AutoStratic and you find different tickers that you are of your liking. And especially if, let's say, we're using the Radar Pro or even the regular Radar ticker, or excuse me, indicator, that when we see a list of these things, maybe we don't always have the time to look through every single one. But when we find and land on something we like, we could write it down here. Okay, so let's see what this looks like. Okay, so by going to settings and clicking trading journal, we just turned it on. Okay, so what we can do in here is that we can write in this box what we want our journal to look like. So maybe we started off with an affirmation, you know, stick to your rules, follow the plan. Aim for 5% profit per day, or today. Let's say today, because it's very instant, right? Then, so you see how it updated here in the top? Then I could say what my watch list is. Maybe one of my watch lists, so there was one ticker I saw. What ticker was that? IWM. So personally, and I'm talking personal as in Kia Keeley's thinking this, personally, we might have a bearish setup going into tomorrow for IWM. Does everyone see this? If you're familiar with the strat, you kind of see this as a reversal setup, what we call a 3-2-2 reversal. But we have a bearish trade idea that was generated here. Also, one other thing to remind is that to get the options contracts, the AI options contracts to appear on the right, you have to make sure that is selected as well. Okay. So this trade idea is looking for possibly if this triggers tomorrow, this IWM trade, that I might be looking for 177 puts for December 15th. right? And that might be the trade I take. So here I can go back to the journal and write down what my watch list is. I can say IWM. I'm probably like watching snow tomorrow, coin, and then say IWM trade 177 puts for 12.15 if it crosses below 178, right? I can write that down. And you see, it's all updated in real time. And so I can create a whole list of all these things, and then it's gonna keep right in front of my face, never looking away, that I always have in front of me what my trading plan for the day is, some of the notes that I'm taking. And so I'm not losing sight of what I planned and getting distracted by something else. And yes, it stays here no matter what ticker I go to, right? See? So I'm on SPY now, it stays there. And so I can update this whenever I want. So look here on futures. On futures, we kind of have a bearish setup there. So I could go and say, ooh, futures looking interesting. So ES1, you know, trade short under 455 or something, right? And then it updates. So it automatically saves, right? And if you ever want to save it, and that, so if you have multiple charts, for example, multiple chart layouts, you can come down and click save as default if you're ever fearful that this is gonna disappear. Okay, so you can click save as default, and then, you know, but it's not gonna switch up. Okay. So we were absolutely excited to share that feature with everyone. And I'm really looking forward to people, you know, being just a bit more organized in their trading plans. One other feature that we just added. So there's some days where, let me hide the radar here. There's some days where we might have a setup here, right? And there might be trade ideas for both ways, and that we trigger both setups, right? So if you can see here, maybe sometimes you might get a little confused, like, oh, which one's the one that I should pay attention to, because they both triggered both the call and triggered the entry. One thing that we included is that when an entry gets grayed out, if there's a reversal, the grayed out means that it goes invalid and that the trade idea is no longer valid or it's exhausted. Okay. And what we included on the right is that if there's a trade idea that becomes inactive and is no longer valid, that it will show inactive that this is the one, and that the one that is triggered is the one that's taking priority. Okay. You guys feel that's helpful? So this is almost like, you know, it's not technically a stop loss, but it could in some ways be treated like one, right? In terms of understanding when a trade may not be valid or in your favor anymore. So that was just all of these things that I just covered, they were just added today. So with swing trading, okay, so let's dial some things back. So I'm actually gonna maybe go to some fresh chart or something, right? Number one, so with swing trading, what is swing trading, right? Swing trading is taking a trade and holding it longer than just one day, right? Whereas day trading, we know, is buying and selling an asset within the same trading day or session. Swing trading is holding a position through multiple sessions, at least overnight for one, or for more days than that. With swing trading, it can be highly momentum based, okay? And where you do in swing trading is by understanding price action as well as understanding the momentum. So how do we assess that? And how can we even use AutoStratic to assess that, right? The number one way that we at least assess momentum is through time frame continuity, right? If you aren't already aware of time frame continuity is how many time frames are all aligned to being green or being all aligned to being red. It also says how many of these time frames broke the high of the previous candle or the low of the previous candle. Everyone understand that? So you kind of see, just to clarify and explain a bit further, right? On this trading day for this ticker, BITO, we have, what do we see here at the bottom? We have the day is red there, right? The week is green, the month is green, and the quarter is green. What else we can see, if I were to make a legend, is that the month and quarter down here, they both broke the high of their previous candles. So they're kind of pointing up, right? To simplify it for anyone who's new. So they broke up and they're going up. They're trying to break resistance up. While the day and week here, those two lines mean that they're inside the range of a previous candle. So that's kind of in a bit of consolidation. Okay. When we are thinking about the momentum of the overall market, we like to trade with the trend, correct? We don't like to trade against the trend. Has there been anyone for the past month of November who has been fully successful in trading puts? Were there times where you traded puts and you got hurt? I'll be honest and be the first to say that I did at least once or twice, right? When we look at a stock like Apple in all of November, why was it just straight going up? It was mostly straight going up because from the moment that we started the month on November 1st, we started on November 1st, this day was green. So that means our momentum's green on the day. That week was green. We started the month green. And then the quarter is green. Right? So I typically draw pink lines to mark where the candle open was of that first day of any month, that first trading day. So when we have this, right, this has full momentum up. And as long as it has all of this green, and as many of the things it has that are an arrow pointing up, you see, let me just run that back one more time. Watch as I'm pressing next and advancing these candles, watch this, the day, week, month as we go up, okay? So we're green, we're green, we're green. All these arrows are pointing up. All the arrows are pointing up. We're green. Still green. Look at this. So we get a red day, right? And there may be people who say, and as I can also see, is that we hit a bit of a previous high here, right? So there may be people who say, hey, we're hitting a resistance and now we're getting a red day. This is the time that the market's about to get destroyed, right? And then what happens the next day? If you traded puts and you were expecting we were going to get destroyed, you got invalidated immediately the next day. And a little bit of homework or pop quiz for everyone. What setup just happened here? And this isn't extremely important to know right now, but what setup happened right there on this green candle? So yeah, okay, awesome. Thanks. Awesome, family. So yes, that's a kicking bull, right? If you don't know this term, this is in our instruction booklet, but there was a red day, a fully bearish day, followed by a gap up. And in this case, anybody who went short on Apple got hurt and had to cover their position and save themselves. Meanwhile, the bulls continue to feast and just run and trample all of the bears over, right? But so just to finish off this thought, and then we're going to move a little bit away from time frame continuity after this. But you see how our momentum is just so fully green, and that even when we had a red day, we had an arrow pointing up, right? The arrow pointing up on that D at the bottom, because we broke the high of the previous day. So that means we are still directionally up, even though the day is red and the momentum is slowing down a bit. But because the directionally up, these arrows pointing up, we are still going. And you kind of see here, right, that Apple nonstop, because there was just nothing. There's nothing else other than maybe some previous highs that was saying that Apple is going to slow down. And there were many tickers in the market that were like this, correct? So for anyone who's a beginner here, does this make sense? That about this box that I'm showing everyone and how this represents how the candles are green and red and how that represents the momentum? That makes sense? Because eventually you're gonna get a bit more, just see it in real time as you are using it as you trade. And of course I'm gonna share, because so this tool right here, this is part of the AutoStratic Pro, but there are other time frame continuity indicators that are out there that show you, if you're not aware of this, right? It shows you the what color things are and whatnot. Um, if anyone wants to drop the ones they use, there's other ones. But this is the one that I had coded myself in this part of the AutoStratic Pro. But so that this is one way about momentum, right? And this is also telling us about price action, like what's happening. We're breaking the high of the previous candles, right? This week is higher than the previous one. This week broke the high of the previous one. This week broke the high of the previous. And then when you have the month, interesting in this case, right? Where in this case, AutoStratic, which generates trade ideas, we know that. AutoStratic generated a trade idea for puts for Apple on the month, going in from October into November. But this never triggered, right? This never triggered, but instead Apple just went up and then and broke the high of the previous month. So with that gives us so much momentum. And as we're going to see, the bigger the time frame, the more momentum you have in your favor that you are considering for how far things can go. Okay? And so I'm going to demonstrate that with some real tickers and show how you can do this yourself. And you can also see how AutoStratic is going to be helping you through that as well. Everyone's good? And so some of the questions here, if Jazz or someone else can also help answer. But appreciate y'all. So here's our first example that we're gonna go with. Okay. So I'm going to turn this off for a moment, and I might circle back to what was just showing there on the chart at the moment. But so where do we start when we think about swing trading? Okay. Where do we start? Because here's why, and maybe I should have covered this a bit earlier, but here's why do we even want to think about swing trading, right? Who here press 4 if you have, actually, excuse me, press 5 if you have a 9 to 5 that you're working and that you trade while working your 9 to 5, right? Press 9 if you're not able to watch the charts all day. Okay, see? So this is why we have to think about why we're trying to think about swing trading. Okay? So when it comes to swing trading, we are focused on the bigger time frames, right? We want more time for ourselves, for us to make trading decisions, and we want to allow ourselves more time and patience so that we don't have to stare at the charts all day. Correct? So when I am thinking of swing trading, I start at the daily time frame, but honestly, if I'm thinking a bit more long term, I start at the weekly. Okay. And so we're going to see a few things about, and let me see if I can get to, let me see if I can see where, at least on this trade, where I started thinking, because this is a recent trade, and this was from Mara. Okay. So, I think it honestly started around late October that I started looking at Mara, but some of the entries that we have seen lately on Mara and Riot started kind of mid-November, and some of us got some entries there. So I'm going to come back here. All right. So, and here it is again, where we have some triggered ideas on AutoStratic, as well as something where it goes inactive, something that's not enforced. So it seems we triggered puts and triggered calls, but the calls are taking priority. But so that alone, right? So when I start looking for trade ideas that I'm thinking potentially for swings, I start on the weekly time frame. Okay. So what else I may do is that I pull up the AutoStratic radar, and I'm going to show you exactly what I'm going to do here. And so my workflow is that I pull up the AutoStratic radar, and I either start on the daily time frame or the weekly time frame. Okay. So when I'm on the weekly time frame, because you can go into settings and switch which time frame you're currently working on, right? This narrows down some of the tickers that I want to be looking for longer term swings. Why is that? I'll come back to Mara in a moment, but maybe I can start on Tesla just so that we have an example that happened recently. I'm like moving this all the way around, so my apologies. But so one of the trade ideas that happened this week, right, was Tesla. Tesla to the upside. Typically because AutoStratic scans when the market is closed. For the weekly time frame, we can take the weekend, because this is available on Friday to Monday. We take the weekend to find those weekly setups. Okay, the setups aren't available right now, the ones that were scanned from this past weekend, because we're during the trading week. But typically but not just typically, always on weekends, this populates with the new trade ideas for the next following week. Okay, some of the things that had trade ideas on here were Apple, Tesla, Fastly, PayPal, Neo, MRK, and Upstart. If I'm not mistaken, Costco is also on there. But essentially, why do I like these things on the weekly time frame? Well, when you are on the weekly time frame, the potential for how far the trade can go and how long the trade can last becomes much larger and longer. Okay? The trade setups on the bigger time frames are bigger and have more importance than the ones below on paper, as we assess in terms of the things that we think about on, indicators, strategies, anything related to technical analysis. Okay, the bigger the time frame, the more important. If we were to compare to day trading, right? Let's say we find a double top or a double bottom. If we understand those terms, a double bottom on a 5-minute time frame, we just can assume that, hey, our trade in that is going to last a short time, right? The smaller the time frame, the shorter that maybe the trade setup even lasts. The bigger the time frame, the longer and more dollar moves we are expecting from that setup, correct? So on this day, or on this setup for Tesla, on the weekly, our setup is further up here, right? And for AutoStratic, and this is actually going to switch, I believe, to the December 15th once I advance. But the weekly setups are looking for trade ideas that are much further out of expiration, especially when we're trading options. Okay. So I'll try to give a list here, and you can feel free to jot notes. Okay. When I'm looking for a daily setup on AutoStratic, I'm typically thinking 2 weeks out expiration. Okay. At least 2 weeks out expiration if I see a daily setup. If I see a setup on the weekly time frame, I'm anticipating getting and buying 1 month out expiration. Okay. So when we see a setup here that has formed on Tesla around November 23rd, if this setup on Tesla happens, I'm looking bigger picture on how far this can go, likely until December or maybe January. And then, so with that said, if we find a setup on the monthly, I may be considering 2 months out expiration, 3 months out, or something much further. Because the places at which, if we think about the entry point, which we can see right here, we can see where some of these entry points are, if it were for puts or for calls. Every recent high becomes where our targets are, at least according to the strat, according to some ICT teachings and technical analysis overall. We are looking for these previous highs as some of our targets. Because you see here on the weekly, the most recent high is back up here at 257 on Tesla. 270 almost, 268 on Tesla, right? If I go down to the daily time frame, let's say there is a setup here, and look how useful this is for us, because there was a setup on this day. If we triggered an entry from this entry there, our first target is up here, but then the most recent high after that is up here. And so just to make this more clear, because there's some points that may be just a little fast, and especially as I'm making sure newer traders understand as well. When we are assessing how the price of these stocks are going to move, when an entry point happens, we are, if we're going for calls, and in this case it was calls, right? When we're looking for calls, we are looking at every most recent high to consider about how far the stock can go. Okay? And so for calls, all of the most recent highs, these points, these are different depending on what time frame we're on. Correct? Because you see these arrows here that I drew are all on the daily time frame. But then these red lines up here are according to the week. These are how, so, and then to sort of zero down the idea here, right? On the daily, this is as far as the stock is saying it can go. These arrows on the daily. On the weekly, you're looking at possible $20 moves, $30 moves from this entry. Okay? So I just want to take a moment that for especially newer folks and intermediate folks, that you understand that, right? That when you find something on the bigger time, that just means like the potential is way bigger. The dollar move for the stock is way bigger. And now type in chat, if that's true, what does that mean for us, for our money, if we're able to catch those moves for longer periods of time? So post that in chat. And so all these answers, right? Big money, right? Well, Squad J said, catch me at the bank. Mass count said bigger. More money, cha-ching, bigger reward, so on and so forth, right? So when you're looking at the bigger picture, and now let's combine everything we learned here. When we have full understanding of the momentum of the stock with the time frame continuity, how green is this? How red is this? How many are arrow up? How many are arrow down? Right? We understand the momentum. When we think about the price action and how far these things can go, now we are able to fully assess the bigger picture and make plans that exceed just one single day of movement, right? And so why I'm stating this and zeroing this in is because a lot of us get so caught up in that the day-to-day day trading, the choppiness, the panicking, you get in and something doesn't go your way immediately, you get out, you lose within just 10 minutes, right? And you're like, oh my God, you know, So what we're zeroing in, especially as we use AutoStratic as a tool, is that you are looking at the bigger picture and that you're able to see beyond just the current day that we're trading in. You're seeing the future. Like, that's so Raven, right? You don't know exactly what's going to happen, but you are pre-anticipating that if this happens, if we get a trigger, if this happens, then that happens. What is the that happens, right? That we can get to these previous targets over time, and that we have a long-term expiration to allow us to capture those moves. Understand, everyone? So in the case of Tesla, I'm going to try to put this side by side here, okay? So in the case of Tesla, what made Tesla so cool this week is because it had a setup on both the daily and the weekly, right? So let me pull this back a moment, right? I'm gonna take some of these indicators off. Okay. I'm also gonna take this off. So on the left side is the daily chart, right? On the right side is the weekly. So we keep the weekly in mind because this can be a bigger piece for our pie and incentivize us for a potential bigger trade that can go up even further, right? When one interesting thing we can do when we're trading in these levels and whatnot, right, is we can see one entry and one trade idea. Let me see if I'm going to display the trade ideas. So in this case, right, you see how on this day that for this Tesla, the trade idea was 239 calls, and then the trade idea on the weekly was rather 247. You see how the weekly one is much bigger, and it's seeing like much bigger magnitude than this one. That's number one, right? But we can think about if we were to trigger calls or a long position on the daily time frame, can that lead into a trigger on the weekly time frame that then gets us to this bigger pie, this target level that's up here, right? Can we get some type of domino effect that makes that happen, right? What I can do here, and this is a bit of some extra sauce that you might want to consider, is that you can actually have two AutoStratic, depending on what TradingView plan you are, how many indicator slots you have available, but you can have two AutoStratic indicators operating at the same time, and you can set one of them to the weekly time frame, where it says set which time frame to use for intraday entry levels. So I just set this one to the weekly one, while this one, the first one, stays on auto. So whatever time frame I'm on, it's going to show you which one I have. So I'm on the daily, it's showing me the daily time frame. So now, does this make things a bit interesting here for us? Let me see something here. Did I just do that right? Okay, I think I did that right. Okay, just But does this make now, because before we had the weekly time frame and daily time frame side by side, right? And we can see this is the entry for calls. I know like we have a little bit of overlap here, and that's it kind of makes it a bit difficult to read. But the point of what I'm showing is that we have layered on our chart, we have the daily entry for calls, and then the weekly setup entry for calls. And then we have both of those trade ideas that we have both here, right? The weekly one and the daily one. And that if we keep this on our chart, what if we trigger on the daily, can that domino effect into triggering the weekly and give us more time that we are considering to hold our position? And then we are going to be watching the time frame continuity box at the bottom here to see if that is lining up where it goes green and stays green. Everyone see how I'm thinking through there? Where if I click advance, what is it that happened yesterday on Tesla? We triggered the daily entry here, and that led us all the way up to trigger the weekly entry. And now those trade ideas that we saw over there, those go in force. Those ones that I believe were for 247 for December 15th. The bottom here on the box, it went from back here, red day, red quarter, green week, green month. That's a little inconsistent. When the momentum is inconsistent, that leads to inconsistent movement, which might be consolidation. But on the next day, if you took an entry here, and I'm gonna also go to the lower time frame so that you're able to see what it looked like in real time. If you took an entry there, that could be you looking for us to get to those previous targets labeled there, as well as into a potential trade idea to hold for longer. And then that transitioned into today. And even though this is a red candle, right? Tesla was an amazing swing trade because it got from these two entries as high as 252 for at least one swing trade into one day. Okay. So what I covered about the domino effect, right? That might, especially for newer traders, that might take some used to getting used to. But that's not just the main case of how you're going to catch swing trades or longer term trades, right? We started using Tesla just because it was a very recent example of how you can have both daily trade ideas and weekly trade ideas and how to take advantage of both. Does that make sense? So at least people that aren't feeling confused as though they have to always keep watching for this. Because we're going to show other examples where in ways all you need is the weekly to think about your long-term move. So on this trading day from here, all Tesla did, we started the day right here where that yellow line is. We started the day right there. Then we crossed above that entry level there on the daily. Then that went up. We crossed the weekly level right there. That led into a swing trade into the next day with full momentum that was there to the upside. Everyone see at least how, in this case, we kind of had like a triggered entry. We entered the calls. And then you could use that weekly one either as a reference to say, hey, like either more confirmation or entered more calls. So that's that example on Tesla. Everyone ready to look at another example? So what's been hot in the streets lately? We have oh, I think this one was hot in the streets, wasn't it? This is the hottest street, right? Coinbase, one of the greatest trades of this month. And in my opinion, going to be one of the greatest trades of next year. Right here, on this trading day, right? On this is the weekly time frame. AutoStratic generated a trade idea on here. And on the AutoStratic radar, you will have been able to find it that day as well. Okay. When we have these two trade ideas, right? Because we're an inside candle and time frame continuity is pretty decent. And we have the, what's our time frame continuity? We're green on the week, red on the month, but pointing up on the month, and green on the quarter, pointing up on the quarter. So again, if we want to go up and we are feeling bullish and we want to fight the bear like Mr. Call, we want as many of these green and as many of these pointing up arrow, right? So if we trigger this entry for calls here on the week, we are wanting that, we want this month to go green. It's already in our direction. We have it pointing up, but we want that to go green and give us our momentum, right? We have one target for how far it can go. And that could be a small point where we take profit. But if it does get past that, like I said before, we are looking for these previous highs to be our target levels. Some homework for anybody who read the instruction booklet or familiar with the strat. What are all of these consecutive lower highs called? What setup is that? So as you're putting, right, that's a pivot machine gun, a PMG. If you aren't familiar with those, again, you can look in our instruction booklet that's included with your AutoStratic purchase, or it's for free here in the Discord server. So you can check that out and learn a bit more about the strat and some important variables and chart setups. So you see that because this is the weekly time frame, this is giving us pretty far out expiration when this was November 30th, right? So number one, we triggered it. And that gives us a potential entry there, right? And so we triggered it. Either we enter with confidence, or we at least wait for a close above this level. In the last training, we mentioned about wanting closes above or below those levels for more confirmation. So in this case, as we go up, it's now November 6th, and now we get to November 13th. And this is giving us profit for at least that amount of time, right? And with the progression of each, week, we're kind of being able to just watch one by one. We're not even, in some ways, you can just simply just watch this chart and not even worry about all the minutia happening in the middle, right? Because like when we have the smaller day trading and things are iffy or SPY is choppy and we're getting burnt by theta, we could just be continuously looking at is the momentum still green, and are we still uh directional to where we're approaching? What I can say very confidently with AutoStratic is that within that 89% of the time, as long as it doesn't reverse and it's moving from the direction of the entry, that it is looking to take out those previous targets that it's written on the chart. Okay? And it will try its best that price action, that it's assessing that price action is likely going to get there. And so many times we've been shown that it really does attract and get there, as it's really assessing the algorithm of the movement of the market, right? And so from this trade idea that we found on the weekly, that we can think about buying at least a month out from when the trade idea was. Remember when I mentioned when I'm thinking about expiration, it said November 15th, and that worked out. But that expiration, we're using that as a reference. That expiration might even go even further if we're thinking about how far this can go, if we're thinking about taking out these previous highs. And so from the trigger, which was on November 6th, all the way to this week, Coinbase just kept going. And why? Just like how we covered with Apple, we keep triggering higher and higher, and the momentum staying green. Okay? And that the momentum will not leave us until we get something like triggering down somewhere in here, right? But on any of these candles you see on the chart, did we ever go below the previous one? If we never went below the previous one, we have no reason to think that price is going to come back down. And momentum is so bullish that until we see any of these things falter, until we see a lot of these bigger time frames go red, number one, and number two, if any of those time frames have an arrow down. That making sense to everybody? And so our weekly entry was here. And I'm gonna make this green. Our weekly entry was here. I'm gonna write it down. If we switch over to the daily time frame, let's see how many entries happened on the daily. So in this case, we had one call that was triggered there on the daily, moving up. Then we had another trade idea triggered up to the upside. We went down for a bit here, and we took out maybe this gap. So this trade idea still worked out, that we still fell back down. But then we get another trade idea back to the upside, still above this weekly entry. Let's note something important here in this case, right? Let me dial it back. The weekly is in force, right? Because we can all, everyone sees this, right? We can all see that the price here is above this green line, which means that we are still in force above this level. Until we fall below this, I'd say, if we fell below this, maybe we wouldn't be in force anymore. But as long as we're above this level, we're still directionally up if things aren't falling down too much. Here we created a daily and a trade idea again. And this might mean that we have more opportunity to go back up, right? Because let's get it all the way back to the simple basis of AutoStratic. If we trigger a trade idea and we have this momentum, we have high probability to go to these target levels, correct? If we mark these target levels down, and these are the daily ones, write it down here. Number one, we trigger the entry there, right? Okay, it's not showing this here for a moment. That's okay. But we can see that we crossed above the high of this day, right? There was a red day, and that might shake people out and get people worried, right? Because it went red. But remember what I said about these arrows and what price is doing. If we're breaking higher or breaking lower, we're still directionally up with most of our green. So after triggering that, from the day of entry, it took 1 or 2 days to then get back up to these targets. And this is giving us an understanding here, again, that these trade ideas, they don't always just day trade in and out, right? They are looking to take out those targets as long as that momentum is with it. And so when we trigger something here, it may not happen the first day, but if the momentum stays and we have good expiration so that we're not getting shaken out, we're not panicking, the contract isn't fluctuating like crazy. If we buy time at least 2 weeks out, at least 1 month out, that can pay us dearly because we are capturing more dollar movement and we're not getting hit with crazy volatility that forces us to stare at the chart all day. Because you can just simply look at these bigger time frames, look at the triggers, look at the targets, and just check in and out. If you're working a 9 to 5, you go in the bathroom, you pull out your secret laptop that's stashed in the back of your pants or your phone, and you look at the daily time frame and weekly time frame on your chart after you enter the position, and you're just checking. What are you just checking for? Checking that what arrows do we have? If I were to simplify it as simple as that, right? What arrows do we have right now? How green are these time frames? And you're just seeing here and there to see if it's still aligning with the expiration you picked, which is not risky at all, and that you're, nothing crazy is happening. If there was like some news that dropped and, it's a big reversal, there's nothing preventing that, unfortunately, right? But most of the time when it comes to price action, you could just go in the bathroom, check your phone, look at the daily time frame, see if it's still aligned, and then go back to work while you have a stop loss set so that, if anything happens, and if you can't look at the charts, then you have to worry. But that puts you in a position of power and control because you are looking ahead. You are not just focused on the chart and so obsessed with these small movements that these market makers are trying to punk you out of, right? But then you take control on how long you expect for, as long as it's following your plan, it is you are fully expecting, trying to take out some of these targets, that this puts power back in your hands, that you don't have to, that you can just literally sit back and just monitor it here and there. And as I walk through this example, I know I skipped ahead as I was sort of going through these charts, but you see, every time we had a trade idea, we just kept triggering that trade idea up, right? Every time we had a trade idea, we just kept triggering it up. Another trade idea, triggered up, triggered up, triggered up, triggered up. And so this kept going up. Remember, there's no down candle. There's no reason to trade puts if we don't have any down candle or any sense that we might reverse, right? Even as we took out all these crazy targets, I'll be honest, coin is a little bit of a crazy beast, but we can think through all this stuff as long as we have momentum. So I'm going to pause, and there probably were other things that I wanted to cover because there's so many examples of these things. Because there was Mara that I wanted to showcase, there was Snow that I wanted to showcase, and there was Boeing. But Boeing we've already talked about in the Teach That Trade launch video. But Boeing was a swing trade for anyone who wasn't there that went 1,000%. That AutoStratic generated a trade idea. But before I go any further, because it has been an hour, it's crazy how time flies when you're explaining things. But some key things that, again, that I just want to zero in and make sure everyone is understanding is that, number one, you are looking at those bigger time frames for those setups. And you are waiting for those triggers and making sure that the momentum is aligning with the time frame continuity, and that price action is aligning, that it is moving further in that direction. It's maintaining in that direction. It's not, triggering the opposite direction at any moment. And if it is, you're checking to see if these time frames are going any other direction. Number three, you're trusting the setup, and that you're just giving yourself a bit more patience to not overwhelm yourself about the day-to-day. Okay? And that just gives a lot of more power. And I don't want to feel repetitive in that way. I want to make sure that I'm in alignment with you all, especially for those who are looking forward to this. I want to make sure that some of the topics I covered were helpful, and I want to make sure there aren't any gaps in the knowledge that I'm sharing. So if there's anything else that people wanted to acknowledge, or if maybe there was something I missed, I definitely want to see that. But definitely give me a temperature check here in chat to say if this made sense, if there's anything additional that you might be looking for or thinking about. So we have to think through that. So yeah, type in chat so I can just see the temperature check for everything. There was one member, his name I think starts with a B, but he was the main reason, I believe, that I even had the idea to have a swing trading thing. So I wanted, if he's here, that'd be Burhan. Yes. So did this all make sense, Burhan? You're the most important to me right now. Because, you inspired this session so that we can educate everybody. I want to make sure that. Okay, so let me look through this here. You don't. Okay. Great question by Divine Dollars. Do we need full time frame continuity, or just the majority? It doesn't have to be full, right? According to the principles of the strat trading system, it's ideal that you trade mainly just the tickers with full, because that is having the most momentum in your favor, and you are essentially going to be trading things that are just going to have lots of probabilities towards the direction they're going. You know what I mean? So it's like, essentially, with time frame continuity, the probability of your trade working out just gets higher and higher the more that you have in your favor. Personally, full time frame continuity for me goes up just to the month. The quarter isn't always necessary for me personally. The quarter and the year, but the more the merrier, right? So, if you were to ask me, I'm not sure if any stratologist or the scientists of the strat, because there are many, and we can trust their vision because of as they uphold the principles and the direct teachings of Rob Smith, who was the creator of the strat, who may he rest well as he passed earlier this year. But he's given us these tools to fulfill this. But for me, full time frame continuity can go up to the month, and because that's enough momentum to just carry you through the refresh um, that happens from month to month. You know what I mean? But like I said, the more the merrier. If you have that quarter with you as well, if you have that year with you as well, then that's great. But if you now understand time frame continuity as I taught it, you're going to see that when stocks have conflicting time frame continuity, where some is red, some is green, some is red, some is green, that you're going to see how that stuff starts to trick you out, and that it can lead to choppiness and indecision as the bulls and bears are battling it out. Okay, so it's not a necessity all the time, but it increases the probability of whatever trade setup or idea that you're looking at for it to work out. So that's a great question, Divine. Theta when swing trading. So there is, how do you calculate risk before entering the swing trade with Theta? One thing that's interesting is that we have a risk calculator in development. Like that is, that our team leader, Sannon, that he has developed and he will be sharing really soon. So that's number one. Another tool is options profit calculator that we currently have. And it gives a decent sense of understanding the decay of options when thinking about expirations, right? But here's a rule of thumb. The rule of thumb is that the longer the expiration, the smaller the theta. The thing about theta is that it increases day to day. Okay? If you see any of the contracts that expire on Friday this week, the theta on those contracts is large. If you see a contract that you see theta on tonight, if you check that same contract tomorrow, the theta is going to increase because it just makes sense, right? If options contracts expire, that means the closer we get to expiration, the more at risk it's becoming worthless. Okay. So the farther out you have things, the way smaller theta affects you. Okay. And so that's why I always advocate for buying time on your contract, buying further out expiration, because time is our most valuable asset. Not just in trading, in life. All we have is time. And so when it comes to your trading and you want to be comfortable and you're thinking about swing trading, if you're trying to capture more movement, then you want to allow yourself more time so that you don't put yourself at risk that you're running out. So thanks everyone for sharing other tools that have full time frame continuity. So yeah, the AutoStratic Pro is just the one that I built this time frame continuity, but there are many others out there. I built this one because this is the one that best lines up with AutoStratic. I used to use Strat Assistant, but Strat Assistant used to interfere with the other components of AutoStratic, at least visually. So I had to create my own. And there's gonna be other updates that come to this one as well. So I'm planning on trying to see if there's like an outside setup that's also embedded in here in addition to our outside radar. So as it pertains to Mara, because someone asked to cover so let me just yeah, someone asked to cover Mara. So you see there's a trade idea here on the week. So very similar to Coinbase, similar to how we covered on Tesla. And we think about what happens if we trigger calls and then where things can get to. So a lot of trading is all about if this, then that, right? And with the strat and AutoStratic, we can find how these things can work in tandem from the daily and weekly and see, those opportunities. So in this case, on one day we triggered an entry on calls on the daily, and it triggered what it said here was the $10 call for December 1st, which is pretty far out from this date of November 16th. Triggered that, right? And then we didn't get to the target in this day, but what did I say earlier, right? If we have the momentum and we have the arrows, then we can try to think that our expectation is we're likely trying to take out some recent target, in this case, a recent high. And like clockwork, it happens, right? If you just give it some time. And so this is a swing trade. This is a swing trade of one day, right? Because the momentum is there. The target's still available to be taken out. And we have expiration that is long enough that allows us to even fulfill and get to these levels. As we even got to that level, what did that do? Triggered another trade idea on the weekly. Okay. And that gives it even more time. And even now, it's looking for even further trade idea for calls up to December 15th. And so you see how now that is December 1st is this Friday, from that initial entry on both the daily and the weekly, both of them giving us confirmation. As long as these things stay momentous and our stop loss doesn't get hit and we get enough time that we can climb the ranks. One last thing I can sort of share as a tidbit, and some people already know this, but learn how to draw parallel channels. When the Academy launches next year, I'm going to be covering a lot about parallel channels and what those are. But let me just show here that understand that price likes to move within ranges. Price likes to move in ranges. When we connect highs and we find certain trends, the price tends to like to trade along sort of it. Okay? And so when I draw parallel channels, I sometimes like to watch the movement without even any indicators on. And then I can use, in a way, AutoStratic to my ability. That if I see some type of entry idea for calls, and I understand that in parallel channels we can go from the bottom of one to the top of one, that maybe, just maybe, I can anticipate a little bit of the future and think about what can happen as we're trading within this channel. And what exactly that happened that allowed some of us in the Wealth Squad and some of us in here to get riot calls Mara calls and coin calls is because we saw some of that happening all the way along there. And especially when we triggered this weekly level that we demonstrated and we enter a different part of the channel, then maybe, just maybe, we can get to the other side from the bottom. And so this is, I'm not going to go in full depth here, but I just want to end off this session with how there could be one more tool that you want to include in your toolkit as it pertains to using AutoStratic and learning swinging, and how some of these things can assist you in your swinging abilities. Okay, I'll definitely cover this a bit further, and we're gonna have more sessions covering these techniques and strategies. The parallel channel, just in this case, it is a tool here. There is an indicator that is similar to what I just did that is called the linear regression channel. Okay, in this case, it's saying we're in a downwards channel. I think if I go to the hourly, something similar, this little thing. But it's something to look into, and feel free to ask questions further as well in chat and whatnot. But so JB, I did see your feedback about some adjusting targets. I can certainly look into what can be done and any further addition into establishing targets, or even adding customization to how we want targets to appear, like fib extensions or other levels or certain levels of resistance. Just for now. Parallel channels, they work similar to Bollinger Bands, but it's not the same. That's very similar. I use parallel channels with broadening formations. Yes, I do. It's the best way. It's the best way. But I am, because we are an hour and 20 minutes, almost 30, I am going to close here. And there are other questions that feel free to ask, not just me, also Shannon and Jasmine. I want to say that if you have a question, please tag one of us three. I just want to put it out there that I'm not always going to be available because I have a lot of running around to do. But I want to make sure everyone knows that Jasmine and Jamal, Sand and Super, they are both resources. They're available all the time. You can tag them. I mean, they're human too, so you just gotta keep realistic expectations. But if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us. We are so in service to you. It is a privilege to always have your time, and we want to make sure that your questions get answered, that even if you can schedule one-on-ones with us potentially, that's kind of open to discussion, that we can set up if it needs to be. There's some of these things that we're working through, especially as we're looking towards launching the academy next year, especially with as it includes mentorship and class settings, and homework, quizzes, testing, what have you. You know what I mean? So that you are engaged knowledge-wise, and yet you are being engaged personality-wise. Okay. We've had the affirmation channel. That's been great. Keeping us grounded, keeping us mentally well, keeping us focused on why we're here, learning this trading discipline, and moving in this community together. Thank you, everybody, for attending today. I hope this was good. Let me know how this was. I appreciate your time, and we will talk real soon.